and Iftikhar covers entirely the conflict landscape of Pakistan, particularly these non-state actors. So over to you, Iftikhar Firdaus Sahab. How do you see this operation of Nalan Mahsoos, and what is your analysis on that?
But there's one thing that I wanted to talk about, because that's what I cover. I cover non-state actors and terrorist ideologies, on how the landscape has been emerging, particularly after this particular operation, at least on the border areas of Pakistan. First of all, the challenges in terms of, I think, what Ambassador Raza has highlighted and what's been the conversation around this room as well is, one of the biggest challenges for Pakistan is going to be the counterintelligence challenge. If you look at the key markers in terms of the Iran-Israel war, and this morning I was looking at for the explanation for all the open source intelligence that's available in terms of who Mossad had actually hired to do their job in Iran, particularly in Tehran. There were two ethnicities that actually came up. One was from Afghanistan and the other network was from Ukraine. Both those areas which are actually under current conflict, which actually brings us to the point, and everybody across the room is knowledgeable enough, there's enough knowledge in this room, that any community that's actually relatively always in conflict is available and more susceptible to outside intervention to be hired. And so within our borders, and this has also been mentioned again and again in terms of what kind of war do we expect now. From a counterintelligence perspective, if you look at it since November, when Syria fell, it was almost evident that Iran is going to be the next target. For the last 2.5 years, there have been at least 8 different interventions from Israel to actually come into Pakistan and create networks. They have been stopped, some with the help of the Chinese, some with the help of the Turks, some with major efforts of our intelligence agencies. And so what I actually want to say is that the war of intelligence is actually at the heart of all of this. And so counterintelligence is merging into counterterrorism on how actually the future scenario will be. Nation states no longer want to invest into falling economies. India's calculation in relation to our operation Bunyal Mahsoos is a lesson that it will not happen anytime soon, that we might see a more symmetric kind of a warfare. And Pakistan's capabilities have always been much better in terms of symmetric warfare rather than asymmetric warfare, because these look for more protracted and more long-fared wars, and that's why we have problems in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and we have problems in Balochistan as well. I don't want to repeat in terms of what it was said about economy, but I'll tell you in terms of how actually we see the future for forecasting on how this future scenario is emerging. Initially, people used to talk about terrorist groups and terrorist entities and their homegrown and their external influences. But what we do see now is we see jihadist freelancers, and that's the newer trend. Specific ideologies have been shattered. At a more nascent level on where these groups are actually operating, they are more susceptible to external influences because their supply chains, their economic and logistical bases inside Pakistan have been dismantled. And so at this particular point, they are actually looking at anybody who could help them out in one way or another. And that's why we believe that the Iran conflict as well as the conflict with India, the concentration is going to be more on protracted hybrid warfare. And I don't need to go into explanations. A lot of speakers have actually spoken about it. But they will not remain any longer stifled in some kind of an ideology. It will be more of a nascent, more reactive kind of a form that we will see emerging in the future trends, which will be detrimental, and it will actually bring in people, who are lost for ideological questions and identity crisis. And that's why it becomes such a big problem that for Pakistan, because we have a youth bulge. And so for all the questions that they keep on asking, and that's why I think that what Qamar and other colleagues are actually doing is to gather students to answer these questions. A lot of the questions that are being asked by the youth in Pakistan, those answers are not being provided by the state. And those answers are actually coming from the non-state actors. Because the state does not want to answer complicated questions of like what our stance is with the US relationship vis-a-vis China, what our stance in Balochistan is, what our stance with terrorist ideologies and groups is in particular. So I think it's the age where proxies will shed their skin and it's going to come out more in the open. And the concept of lone wolves and jihadist freelancers and non-state actors is actually going to become a problem for the state at one point or another. It's already started happening. So in order to control these recruitment patterns, and I think that one of the things that this operation Binyal al-Marsus has actually done in the escalation with India, and I won't go into more details, just one point, major point, is that a lot of us, the criticism that we keep on hearing is coming from a certain kind of a leftist, westernized ideal where we think that all our history that was written till now is doubtful, that creates a certain kind of an identity crisis. And so when Azaz says that we had a lot of respect for Indian journalists is because we saw them at an upper moral pedestal, because the last 20 years and even before that, we've actually started viewing our identity from a more westernized lens. And so what this operation has actually done is, because up till now in this generation, we did not have any active war with India. And so we've been told stories about 65, we've been told stories about 71. And so the majority of the narratives that were drawn by India in this war have actually been falsified. And it actually brings in doubt this entire episteme of knowledge that has been created, that whether what we were told against our understanding of wars that took place in 71 and 65 and even before that, whether even that was correct or not. So it gives this generation a moral pedestal to stand on, to say that we were not present at that particular point, but we are present now, and we were seeing that the Indian media was lying to its teeth. And whatever they were saying were actually falsified narratives. And when we say that we actually can pick up from here, and this is a point, and I totally agree with it, that we are at a point where we need to actually expedite processes to rein in our own people that we have lost at this point. And this is a golden opportunity. I don't want to go into the technical side of it. I think there's a lot of people that will explain the more diplomatic part of it, the more military part of it. But in terms of a nationwide collaboration, I think there's a lot of space, and the time, I believe, is pretty less. Because whatever is happening in Iran, it's going to escalate further. And the largest marker of it is actually, if you look at it in terms of how it's escalating, it has all the signs of creating a major sectarian problem within Pakistan. So if you don't gel this nation in at this particular point, I think it's going to be a major issue to control in the larger future. Thank you very much.
मैं सिर्फ एक चीज़ पूछना चाह रहा हूँ कि अभी मुझे एक इम्प्रेशन डेवलप हो रहा है. यू टॉक्ड अबाउट द लोन वुल्व्स एंड ऑल दैट, दैट्स देयर इज नो डिनाइंग ऑफ द फैक्ट. एक इम्प्रेशन ये डेवलप हो रहा है कि सर ओके थैंक यू सो मच. I was appreciating Mr. Iftikhar Firdaus for his expose, and he said he didn't have any questions, so he covered a lot in very less time, and wonderful. Thank you so much. You spoke about the terrorism and possibility of lone wolves and ideology and other things. There is an impression which is developing in my mind for past few months कि ये जो terrorism है ये भी एक conglomerate बन गया हुआ है. तो it is not only one agency or one organization which is conducting the terrorism. It is like they are sourcing it out, outsourcing it. कि जी वहाँ ये काम करना है, ये बॉम्बर कौन देगा, स्नाइपर राइफल कौन देगा, सुसाइड जैकेट कहाँ से आएगी. Regardless of their ideology, it is just the business now. Is my impression correct? Thank you.
That actually explicitly explains it on the kind of connections. Because in our understanding, this entire non-state business is actually about somewhat for a larger task, or maybe, you know, some part of a greater understanding which we do not understand, but probably these people are working towards. But if you look at it on how these connections are, these lines are blurred now, they're operating more into gray areas of ideologies. There's a wonderful term that they use for it now these days. It's known as salad bar ideologies. So you stand at a salad bar and you just choose whatever you want out of it. Yeah, so it's like a conglomerate. Who would have imagined that? I mean, when you talk about, for example, because there's a huge support in the West in terms of they think that the Balochistan separatist movement, what we call Baloch subnationalists, is somewhat, oppressed in one way or another, and they have no connections with terrorist entities. But at a nascent level, they're protecting the Islamic State Khorasan. Simultaneously, they have a huge connection with the TTP, and at the same time, they are actually funding Jaish-ul-Adl on the other side of the Iranian border. And you can actually explore these connections in quite detail if there is a conversation in relation to it. So it's not as what it seems. The ideological layer is more of a cover-up. And I think that when I say that proxy wars are going to increase, there is all the material that is already there. It just requires some kind of financial network to be re-established. Interestingly, if you go into the case studies on what's happened in Tehran, I refer to Tehran because that's the most recent example. They're using the same crypto wallet that the Islamic State Khorasan has been using. So Mossad is using the same crypto wallet to hire all these people to carry out their operations within Iran on what the Islamic State, it almost has the same address. And we can go into more details about this at some other point, but your idea in terms of what it is, these proxy networks and how they're funded, that's absolutely on the money.